So I really want to dive into the topic of our, this session, because, like as I said, this is the whole theme of the Tally Summit. So if we can, and of course, I was going to say I have no idea what I'm going to ask each person as we go along. Literally, I don't have a list of questions or anything. It really is organic. But as I've had the pre-meeting, so I've talked to people about the relevance of community begins within you and how you see it. And so really just want to throw that question out to both of you and ask you, what is it that is, what does it mean to you? Community begins within you. Do you want to take that one, Patty?
Yeah, so this whole within thing suggests to me that there's something more than meets the eye, and that I have been given a gift of these principles. And just through natural order of things, I feel like I have to give them away. Like I really have to give them away, like almost to the point where I'm so excited to give them away. And then, clearly that leads me to the wrong place. I need to be in a place of peace to give them away. So peace, as opposed to up in my head, ego, because I can go down that route too. And so that's kind of what it means to me. So, and it's been working. I have the opportunity to share what I see in a very organic way when I'm sitting in a front of a group of people in a treatment center. And I have no agenda. It comes from within me. I just say what I have seen that week. And so it comes from a very organic, non-intellectual place, although we can go to that intellectual place in a heartbeat if I allow myself. So I just feel like if this works for me, and the first thing I heard through a principles conversation was, I'm not broken. I never was. I never will be. That the idea of brokenness was contrived. And I thought, I'm a 12-stepper. I'm a recovering alcoholic. How is this even possible? What are they talking about? And it just piqued my curiosity, so that I started reading as much as I possibly could to wrap my head around it. And then events happened that took me away from the 12-step program, and I hired a principles coach. I'm like, can one really stay sober and not have a 12-step program? And, through them. And then I learned this thing called inner wisdom, Patty, not intellectual, heady stuff, inner wisdom. And then I started just getting deeper and listening to it more and more. And the answer became very clear. And I just thought, holy moly, if this is true, I need to tell the world about this. And so I also share in my, at my homeless shelter. I haven't for a few months. I don't call it the principles. I call it things like, you've got this. You've got this. Not the circumstance. You may be in a homeless shelter, but the circumstances of your life are just what you see with your eyes. Not who you are, not how you feel. And it's transformational. I mean, I don't know. I can only see what I see through my eyes. And when seeing the light bulb turn on, and I do all this stuff. I'm a volunteer, right? I don't get paid to do any of this. So it's like, it's an absolute free gift for me. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Lots of things. I was just making a couple of little notes I might ask for you about later. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And the not intellectual is what I've written down. It's not intellectual. So let's move over to Terri and see what Terri sees or feels.
when I first heard the community begins within you, I thought it was a mistake. I thought, no, it's supposed to be community begins with you. You start off doing these things. And I was so caught up in that, I wasn't actually seeing the depth of it originally. And then when I really read it again, I was like, there is no community if you don't feel that sense of community within yourself. If you are not in a place where you see everybody as your community, or everybody as belonging to you and you belonging to them, and have that feeling, community can't exist. So it was really kind of eye-opening for me, because I was really thinking of community on a surface level of there's a group of people that have something in common, or there's a group that you're involved in and you move in and out of communities, but I hadn't really ever thought that it had anything to do with me inside. And so that's been a big eye-opening thing since this started. And it kept bringing up the noun verb thing. So community as a noun is how I've looked at it in the past, that it is a thing that, created or not, it's this thing that you work with or you work around or, you know, you interact with. And lately it's just occurred to me more and more, it's more a verb than a noun, and it's being in that sense of peace and really loving other people and wanting to spend time with them, and, you know, taking the time to get to know other people like you would as if they were your community. And that the more you do that, the more community involvement you actually have. And, you know, when I was little, you know, we were part of a church. We did all sorts of things, Sunday school and, you know, fairs and fundraisers and all that kind of stuff. And then I moved away from that into, you know, more businessy type stuff. And but I never had the sense that it was coming from me. I just thought it was a position or a thing that didn't have a power in and of itself. But now I see it does have a power in and of itself. The fact that you can go out and see someone as part of you and you as part of them and as part of this bigger whole just deepens everything. And it just makes everybody around you that you run into just look beautiful and look friendly and look like you see yourself in them, you see God in them. It's a whole different feeling.
That's beautiful, Terri. And that last statement that you just made, for people who may be listening that have, like you said, like, I can't repeat it exactly, but you said you see God within them, God, and that reflects back to you, and you see God within yourself. Something like that you've just said. Would you like to just explain what you mean by that? Because I think that's a really beautiful statement, and I understand what you mean. I think I understand what you mean by that, but I would love you just to take that out a bit, extrapolate it, if you like.
Sure. And that was one of the insights that I had, that I kind of didn't like at first, because I was raised Catholic. You weren't supposed to put yourself on the level of God. Mm-hmm. That was blasphemous. You know, he's here, you're here. Mm-hmm. So the first time that it occurred to me, I denied it. I thought, well, maybe I can be in the image of God, but I'm not God, you know, and I kept putting all these parameters around it to keep it safe from what I already knew. And then I thought, well, I see it so clearly in other people. Why don't I see it in myself? Why is it harmful to view yourself as part of God? And if we're made in his image and we are the hands of Christ, and all of those things that have come from those religious teachings just took on a new meaning to me. And it absolutely did not, you know, stand against what I had previously seen. In fact, it enhanced it and made it more real and made it more personal and impersonal in a way, because I was able to say, well, it's not about me being special, being God. It's just about the fact that there's no limitations for each one of us. If we all have the same nature inside of us as God, then we can all act as much as Jesus. Miracles can happen, and, you know, hearts can be opened, and just with your presence, if you're really in touch with that part. Now, I'd like to say I'm there all the time, but I'm not. But when you are there, it is really that miraculous as to how it affects other people.
Thank you for sharing a bit more about that. I think it's a really important point. So that's why I want to jump over to Patty now, if I can. And I'm not sure, not everybody likes that word, God. And I'm really aware of that, having, you know, shared the principles for a while myself. Some people get really like, no, you can't say that. They don't like the word. So can I ask Patty, what word would you use if you weren't using the word God? And the same question to you, if you recognize that within yourself and how that is for you, because I think this is such a relevant point in terms of the community begins within you. Just to chat a bit more about it.
Yeah, I like, another word I've used is intuition. And so when we did this group called at the homeless shelter, You've Got This, I was really directing people to their own inner knowing, that deep down inside they knew what they were being directed to do. Those are my words. So for instance, a mother who is in the grocery store and her child is having a temper tantrum. Her instinct in this group was I just want to sit on the floor. My son, I know, has autism, and I just want to sit on the floor with him in the middle of the store. And I said, well, so that is her inner knowing, but her intellect says a grocery store floor is not the place where one sits sits with their child. So, but her intuition, her inner self knew that is exactly what her child needed to do in the moment. So the process is really about giving them permission to trust that instinct, I guess, being another term for this notion of God. At least I do. But I know this whole idea of mind is so much bigger than just the little thought. But it's still part of the grand scheme. It's that power behind thought that says, maybe you should just go sit on the floor with your son, until the dust settles. So that's what that means to me, if that makes any sense at all. It's like that's that first light that goes off. And then the second one says, hey, wait a minute. This isn't the right place and the right time to be who I am, to allow my son to be who he is, But guess what? Yes, it is. It is exactly the right time.
Just had a vision of all screaming toddlers and all mums and dads like on the floor in the supermarket.
And it would be a very calm place.
Yeah. If we're all in it together, kind of thing, and all like stopped worrying about what other people would think, because that's the limiting stuff. The intellect comes up and goes, what will people think? Anyway, that's my take on that. That's a beautiful story, actually, Paddy, and that reminds me of asking, because I think, as for people who are listening, it's inspiring for us to hear about stories, stories of how this happens, how this brings change about, how this brings transformation about for people. So back over to you, Terri. Have you got anything you can share with us in terms of stories where community begins within?
Well, what's funny is, even in the midst of, having a diagnosis and being ultra monitoring my moods and everything, there were so many times when wisdom spoke so clear that I couldn't ignore it, despite what everybody said that wasn't wisdom, kind of thing. And I can remember my girls used to fight, and they were not allowed to physically fight in any way, shape, or form. And they were little, maybe 3 or 4. And they would argue with each other or be mean to each other. And one day, I had nothing on my mind on it, and it was just, something different has to happen. They don't see each other, and it came to me, well, put them on the bottom step of the stairs and make them touch noses. And they did, and they were so confused as to what I was asking them to do. But they giggled hysterically, and they just could not stay mad. And it just allowed them to move away from how angry they were 2 minutes before, And you can't put your nose next to somebody that you don't like and be mad at them very long. It's 15 seconds at most. And I have no idea where that came from. That, you know, that wasn't any parenting technique I read anywhere or had heard from any other mother. It just occurred to me that they're taking this way serious and they really don't need to. Mm. And so there were lots of times like that where wisdom comes in, and it's, when it talks to me, it has such a different feeling where you know it's going to be all right and you don't need to know where it came from. And it just feels so right in the moment that you're almost compelled to follow it in a way that's very heart driven, as opposed to an idea that you get.
I love that.
It's funny, when my oldest got married, she actually had a picture taken at her wedding of the two of them with their noses against for me. And it's one of my favorite pictures just because, you know, it reminds me and reminds them that they can be silly with each other even when they're angry at each other.
Yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? That we can, that it, you know, we don't have to try and change our moods. It just goes like that. Yeah, it's just like things can just change in a heartbeat. I really love that. So Patty, you were talking about some of the work that you've been doing in the homeless shelter, and I believe you and what I read out earlier on from your bio, about what I read on your bio. Do you want to just share a little bit about what you are doing in the community right now? Because I know you volunteer a lot, right?
Yeah. I just have to share this. This came up in my Facebook feed today, and it's just a picture of a frame at a recovery church where I volunteer. And it says, I'm just going to read it. Holy is any place that's safe to tell your story. So, wow, I just thought, that means any place. That means on the grocery store floor. That means in a church. That means in a park. That means in my bedroom. But mostly, because we're talking about within, that means me. That I get to tell my story. I get to, and I don't mean I as in the ego mind. I get that. Especially people in recovery, they get that. Their egos have really driven them to places they would really rather they didn't go. But when I can really feel comfortable with my own story within my own heart, I am free. And what the principles has taught me is my story isn't me. My story isn't me. So no matter where I am, wherever you are, there, no, wherever you go, there you are. Isn't that the famous expression? It's like, yeah, I'm taking me with me. So ultimately, recovery, transformation, all happens when I get comfortable with my own story, because it's not who I am. So I can bring this person, no matter where I go, to a Chamber of Commerce meeting, to my state capitol where I lobby for pay equity laws, to my treatment center, to my church, to dinner. Now this is the hardest part. Dinner with my family is where I have the hardest time being who I am. Isn't that weird? I'm all up in my head. So, yeah, I guess that's, as long as, if we feel safe to tell our story, we're fine. We're absolutely fine, no matter where we are. But there's always that little voice that says, yeah, well, you're nuts, or they're going to think I'm nuts, so maybe I shouldn't tell my story, whatever that is. But I also, you know, again, realizing we're not our stories. What would I be without my story? Now that's a whole other conversation. That's a fun little play of ideas, so to speak.
How does that tie in with community begins within you? I'm curious about that.
Yeah,
The story, you know, because that's what just came up in my mind. The same was like, yeah, where would we be without our stories? How does that connect to community begins within you?
because I can bring my whole self now versus just a body that, you know, I've been volunteering at my homeless shelter for 2 decades, putting cans on shelves and, you know, bringing stuff from the food shelf there. And, but not until very recently in this whole idea, well, I'll just call it an awakening, where I really felt comfortable saying, I'm going to actually talk to these people. They are me. We are no different. But before it was like, oh, these people, they have problems. They need my help. Those poor people. And now I just see them as me. And so now I can still volunteer at the community center. I can still go to the treatment center. But nobody's broken. And that just is so freeing, and it just makes it so much more possible, I think. You know, it's not a matter of, oh, do I have time in my schedule? And yes, that's all very important. But it's a matter of like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this. It's so different. And it's hard to explain. It's the doing and showing up and being instead of showing up and doing. Like I can bump into somebody from the homeless shelter and know exactly what to say to make them feel comfortable and to make me feel comfortable. I'm not just there to stack the shelves with cans. I'm not just there to dish out their food. I'm there to be a presence.
I love that you use that word, presence. That's exactly what I was thinking. And you said about being versus doing. That's it. That's a big shift, isn't it? Because you know, listening to your story about going and putting the cans on the shelves and being there to help them versus you're me, I'm you. You're seeing. Yeah. I mean, the word love comes up for me as well. I don't know whether you would use that, but that's what came up for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. Ultimately, unconditional love. And it begins within me, so that I can be that presence, I guess, wherever I am. And I haven't been awake long enough, so to speak, to bring this person to my state capitol, where we do policy work, where I've always looked at it as a very rigid, structured, this is my point of view, I must get it passed, my bill, versus just this whole sense of we're the same. We can do this together. Maybe I won't get the bill passed. Maybe I will. I can't wait till I have that opportunity to do that at my state capitol. It's just not, not the right political climate to do whatever it is that I do from a policy perspective, but I think it's going to be a blast. I can't wait.
And Terri, it's like sort of the same thing for you to talk about, I suppose, is this real sense of presence. I use the word love. How you see that this being versus doing. In terms of for you personally, you in your work, in your environment, for you, you talked about the verb to community versus the noun the community. How does that all look to you right now?
Well, it's funny because when I was very little, I used to love the idea of Virgin Mary. And I so wished I could be her, the special person that was touched by God and had all of these abilities, and how strong she must have been, and all of that. And, you know, that I was so sure 100% in my bones that love is the answer to everything. And then you grow up and you get cynical about different things. And at different times in my past, I've had it pop in, maybe love is the answer. And then I would, but it can't be that simple, you know, and always going back to that. And then when you find this understanding and you get that aspect of it, it is just that simple. And what I loved when I was reading about Roger and Modelo, the thing that struck me was I was used to working with coaches, you know, where they would stand on a stage and do a presentation and that type of thing. And, you know, instead of standing on a stage, Roger was sitting down next to people talking to them. And I thought, oh, I can do that. And it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't have to only be behind the scenes supporting the people who could stand on a stage, that there were other ways to share this. And I think that model of someone who really sees themselves as equal to every other human being on earth, and that every other human being has that same potential to wake up and change the world, was just super inspiring to me. And I hadn't really had much exposure before that to that kind of being. But when you see teachers like Elsie or Dickon who just emanate it, you get why people followed Sid. You know, you get why people were attracted to it, because it is such a warm place and it feels like being home when you're with someone like that. And the only thing that keeps us from being with people like that is all of our extra thoughts about it. And so the potential is huge. And that's exciting to me. The fact that, you know, you don't have to be a government official, or you don't have to be a life coach, or you don't have to be, you know, the president of something to make a difference, that you can just go and sit down next to somebody on a park bench and love them, and you are being the principles in action. And that just seems far less scary to me, and far less intellectual, and just easy, and like that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've just seen a comment coming from I don't know what to say. Well, it doesn't matter what the name is, because she said, love what Patty said about her perspective changing from placing cans on the shelf to now being a presence. To me, that means she was always kind and giving, volunteering at the homeless shelter. She was there, but now it was with heart and soul. She's put in capital letters. And that makes
sense.
Yeah.
You know, there's a real practicality to unconditional love, per se.
Mm-hmm.
And is it okay if we talk about that?
I'd love to talk about that. Yeah, go for it, Patty.
So the practicality is, you know, hopefully this, what we're talking about here will go out to many, many people who may or may not be thinking about a project, or maybe an area in their community that they are, you know, they could see requires some improvement of some sort. At one time, if you're like me, you'll be thinking, well, I don't have time. My schedule is too busy. For all very good reasons. You know, I got kids. I met people with a woman with 8 children. I get it. But there's, if for some reason, when in those quiet moments, you feel like an urge, just like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if we did this in our community, or something happened. Like I'm just thinking like cleaning up a bus shelter. Because you go there every day and it's really trashy and stuff like that. At some point in time, you will just be moved to take action. Because this inner voice, or this inner knowing, is just going to be so loud that it will move you to do something. And I would encourage all of us to just keep listening to what that is. You know, we've had some serious tragedies in this country lately with especially, you know, in Florida with the gun shooting. And if something moves you to reach out to one of those parents, or just to make a donation, even something small, just follow it and see where it leads. Just follow it and see where it leads. And then, you know, the possibilities are infinite. And that's how we create change. When I think of the Center for Sustainable Change, that's exactly where my head went, is I will always be this soul, this heart, I will always have an inner knowing. And that's the part that's always going to be sustainable. It's going to, you know, my head's going to switch back and forth depending on the project. I have a lot of projects that I would love to see come to fruition. But I just think that's the juice of life, is following that voice. Even if it comes, like, sometimes my ideas come on a yoga mat and I've run them by people and they'll say that's the stupidest thing on the planet. And then maybe my intellect will go, yeah, you're probably right. And then I'll just wait for a new one to come. So, I don't know. I guess that's the practicality, is that little instinct, that inner voice is really something magnificent waiting to show itself in the world.
When we can get past all the busy intellectual thinking, if you like.
Yeah.
I'm really pleased to say that Robert has sent a question in so that we can start talking about that. So he's asked if there are any suggestions for moving beyond believing that I am not my story to actually knowing it. I'm totally taken with the phrase innate well-being, but it's mostly a concept, something I want to be true. I intuitively know it's true, but I don't know it, in capital letters. I don't know it. So who would like to go for that one first?
I'd love to say something. Because for me at first, I had a long time where I was saying, but I'm the exception. I can see it works for everybody else, but me, I have this and that rules me out and that type of thing. But if you look at your life through an open lens, you will find times when you were brilliantly coming from a place of wisdom. And for me, it surprisingly has been in crisis. So just when you would think your mind would be busiest because there's so much going on, you know, my mind would drop into this beautiful silent area in crisis, and I couldn't tell you why I knew what to do, but I could do it in the moment. And I didn't get emotional, and I didn't get all caught up in the feelings, or whether I was doing it right or whether I was doing it wrong, even though they were life scary situations. And if you can look for those, because we tend to have ideas about ourselves, and then we only look at the ideas that reinforce those ideas about ourselves. So if I say, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not going to try things that are art related because I've already ruled that out. And so every definition you have of yourself is made up. And if you can test that here and there when you're least scared about it and say, well, what would it look like if I was an artist? Or what would it look like if I was able to be this? Or what would it look like if I really did have wisdom that was available to me all the time? And when Michael first started his, Inside Out Revolution book, the thing I liked about it is in the very beginning, he said, do it as an experiment. Don't take my word for it. Don't believe me just because I'm saying it, because it won't mean anything to you. But try it for 30 days. Live as if your experience comes from inside and from your experience of your thinking. And that opportunity to try to see things differently and to expand your definition of yourself. And there's so many things limitations we put on ourselves with our definitions. And yet all of those are just snapshots of one moment in time of who we were right then in our thinking. And it doesn't have anything to do with who we might be tomorrow or 5 minutes from now. And, almost any definition you can come up to yourself, well, I'm no good at this, or I'm only able to do this, or anything is all made up. So the freedom that comes with that is that you get to play with it. And a lot of things just get better with practice, and the more you do them. So doing more things that you're not used to, I think, makes you see it for real. You know, as long as you're only looking for things that reinforce your current view, you know, it's really easy to stay in that place. Whereas if you're willing to say, but what if it wasn't true, and experiment with it, sometimes it opens it up for you to really experience the truth of it instead of just hearing the truth of it.
That's really, I think that's really helpful, Terri, really helpful. Let us know, Robert, well, he's just put a thank you and a heart, so I'm imagining that's helped him a lot. I was just going to say, and Patty, do you have anything to add to that? But yeah, I mean, I know when somebody asks a question, it's not just the only person that's thinking the same thing, so we can always.
Oh my gosh, no. I'm right there with you. Like, when I wanted to, I was just having this sense that I needed to leave my 12-step community. And I had heard this, so I'm an alcoholic. I'm always going to be an alcoholic. I can't, it's not curable. I had no other way to think otherwise until I stumbled across the principles. And I started listening to people who were recovering, who were sober. And I'm like, whoa. So kind of like what Terri was saying, is like just to be open. And I was very open. I really was searching for another answer. And I did hire a coach, a principals coach. Not that you have to, there's so much stuff out there already. And there's me, call me. There's a lot of free resources, and that's the whole point of community is we're here for each other. But I wasn't ready, and then she just kept pointing to me, to my thoughts, that my thinking was taking me to the other direction. And that's it, just my thinking. And I'm just taking the word just back, because the power of thought is incredible. It's incredible. And I was using the power of thought against me. I was thinking it was coming from the 12 steps and the blah, 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 and all of the things I was told, but it was coming from me. And she pointed me in that direction. And there's so many people in this community that will help you, point you to your thinking and how you're using the power of thought. And that's what it took for me to, and then underneath that is the sense of confidence, the confidence that you can stand on your own 2 feet, regardless of what you think sometimes. So yeah. But it was a process for sure. It may not happen overnight. For some people it happens overnight, but, and I'm like, yeah. And I tell everybody, you're not broken. And I am the living testament. Yes, you are not broken. I am not broken. And then, I know at first those words are completely meaningless to people until we get to go a little deeper. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I had to talk to somebody, and she needed to point me to my own thinking and how I was creating it in my own mind.
I think that's very common, Patty. I mean, yeah, we can read, but if we can read, we can watch videos, we can listen to audios, but if we've still got a definite story running in our head about ourselves, it is really helpful to get a personal interaction with somebody to help unpick that in a way, and point us to where we're not seeing it clearly, where we're not seeing the truth of who we really are, not broken clearly.
And it's all one energy. Whether it's it's this thing or somebody else's thing, or yours, Sheila, or yours, Terri, it's all one energy. And why wouldn't I trust that one energy, right? And that's kind of all it took for many light bulbs to go off, so to speak.
It reminds me of those little toys that they used to have, the Weebles that had the round bottoms, and you'd tip them and they would go way far over, but they would always right themselves. And it's almost like we are weebles, but we don't know we're weebles. So every time we tip, we go, oh no, we're going to fall,
Right.
you know, and then somehow we get back upright again. And it's just like if weebles didn't know they were weebles, you know, their experience of life would be terrifying.
Yeah, so
Very true.
that weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. That was the thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But when you're wobbling, you forget you can't fall down.
Yeah, totally.
You get glimpses of it, and then you forget it. And then you get a glimpse of it again, and then you hang on to those glimpses, and then they just get longer and longer and longer.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that happening. I just to go back to the unconditional love piece, because I think that's a really important piece. I was running a meetup group here just last week, and the topic was love. We chose that for Valentine's, February, love. And there was a new gentleman joined us, and he was not having any of it. That love was the answer. Just wasn't having any of it. That's a very nice, the emotion of love is very nice, I get that, but it's got its place in society. We have lots of practical problems that need sorting out, around the world, and that's not going to do it. So I thought that might be interesting to explore a little just now, since we've got no more questions coming in.
Actually, what just popped in.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'll read this one out first, and maybe we'll go back to it. Well, actually, Karen has said, love, the passion and force within that is evident in both your stories. So excited for CSC having Terri on board. You're both wonderful examples of the work being done in communities, waking people up all over the world. Great to start this exceptional webinar series. Great. So that's a comment versus a question. Thank you, Karen. We always love your support. I think she's been with us on every Telly Summit since we began, so love that. Thanks, Karen. I saw the word love in capital letters at the beginning. That's why I thought it was something about love. So yeah. So to go back to that point of it was really interesting it's fascinating to watch him in his intellect, and obviously very busy mind about lots of things, and he was just flowing with all these reasons why it won't help here, why it won't help here, why it won't do this, why it can't do that. And yet I think what I've been hearing you two ladies share today, and what I see to be true, is that it is the answer. It is the answer. This is the from within piece that we're talking about here. If we're connected to that does the heavy lifting, if you like, on some level. So can we explore that a little bit? Does that sound like a good thing to do? So I'm going to throw that out to you and see what comes up.
Well, I guess that gets back to this whole within thing. It was really hard for me to understand a busy mind if I don't know anything other than a busy mind. And what I think this love place is the space underneath the busy mind. And if I've never been there, I can completely understand why you think that it's just not possible. Me too. Absolutely me too. And still there in moments. But in my busy mind, I created images of people, places, and things that I didn't like, that I wished weren't responding to me in a certain way. I was the victim of everything happening around me. And so I don't know how you explain this to someone other than to be it. And when I get quiet, the people around me get quiet in my groups. And it's because this, I don't know if it's the stimulus is just shutting down, the outward stimulus, and there's no other place to go but within. that that's the place where I can touch this unconditional love, which simply is that we're all the same. But for our thinking, we are all exactly the same. Regardless of the behavior that is exhibiting itself, which, you know, in my world is alcoholism, drug addiction. And like, I see people when they are not symptomatic and I think, wow, you are an amazing human being. And you are when you're in the ditch with a needle in your arm too. But I don't see them when they're in that state. But it's just, it's really hard to explain this flow of, if I get quiet and I see that they're in their innate health, everything is fine. And they'll see it too. They absolutely will see it. But if I don't see it, they're not going to see it. If I'm reaching out and lashing out to them, you know, you got to stop. You got to try to stay sober and you got to do what your sponsor tells you. And it doesn't work. I can't be a place of love like that. I have to see them as me. I don't know if that answers the question. But that's the only place I can find love. That's the only time I send text to my kids, I love you, is when my head is not busy. It's weird. It's just weird, but that's how it works.
I totally get what you're saying, though, that the traditional meaning of the word love may sometimes get in the way and cause people to say, oh, that's not love. But to me, holding that space for someone without judging them, with being able to see that they have everything they need and they're not broken, is unconditional love. That's what allows, it's like giving sunlight to flowers, you know, and if you can't hold that space and give them that space, it just leaves room for so many other things to try and make them feel better. And it seems like all you really need to do is have some space around things and we all settle down. So whether it's peace or love or whatever word it is, I think it's just that beautiful space when you see someone else as a human being and are just in awe of the fact that we are all miracles and everything we do is a miracle, and including when we get ourselves into trouble and think up all these terrible things and put limitations on ourselves. It's miraculous that we have the ability to do that, and it's miraculous that you can learn that that is your ability and that you are doing that. And so whether it's wonder or love or peace or stillness, it all feels like unconditional love to me.
Mm. Yeah. There's a comment just coming right at this second from Monica saying, getting past, it's not a question as she said, it just may be a valuable learning to help us in sharing more easily. So getting past seeing others as strangers in our own wellness, see none of us are strangers. She read this recently and found it helpful. It seems knowing this is like a magic button. Yeah, I think isn't that something that, I don't know, I was going to say Dr. Bill Pettit says, never broken, or maybe I'm getting mixed up, but there are no strangers. I think we had one of those in the Tele Summit, one of those topics on the sessions, that was it. That's why it's coming back to me now. There are no strangers. In reality, in truth, there are no strangers.
And that's why when you have a horrific event, people come together to support each other, because all the extraneous thinking about who's okay to talk to and is it okay for me to reach out to people drops in the shared humanity. And as much as the terribleness of what happens to other human beings when something like that happens, there's also a beautiful reminder there that we are all the same. And if one person is hurting and causing harm because of that hurt, we're all hurting. And it's physically manifested in that way, but it's also emotionally manifested to all of us. That's why there's so many people who go online and say, I'm hurting because of this. Now, they may not know anybody there, but they're hurting because they're a human being, and they see that somebody was lost and somebody was hurting, and it caused more hurt.
Yeah, it's in times of, that's when community really, really pulls together, isn't it? Interestingly enough, in times of despair, times of war, times of people really come together and rally around. It's very, very interesting, isn't it? Then when times are good, it's like we've got sort of more time on our hands or something, where we start picking on each other. I don't know.
Yeah, because we've got nothing else to do.
But it does remind me when you're a kid and your brothers are picking on you and stuff like that, and then you have something dramatic happen, like one kid goes to the hospital, and all of a sudden everybody's the best of friends, and nobody would think of harming someone else or playing a joke on them or anything. And it's maybe in our nature, but it's also in our nature to come together and support each other. And if we can just see that we don't need an excuse to do that, that we could literally let those walls down anytime we choose to, that leaves a lot of possibility open.
The word compassion just jumped into my mind then when you were talking. So I think that's a big part of this, isn't it? That when we see who we are, to use the statement, the innate health, we're innately healthy, then it seems that compassion is a natural byproduct of that, right? And then we're reaching out into community and we're helping other people.
I just learned this expression this week. I spent the week with the Pettits and a bunch of other people in my community, doctors, the doctor's Pettit, and somebody said something about compassion fatigue. And I kind of knew what that meant. Like, before I understood that everybody is innately healthy, they just don't know it. Sometimes they don't know it. Sometimes they do. I felt like I had to fix them. And of course that brings tiredness and fatigue. And because I think that's the traditional definition of compassion. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But so that also made me understand how you can really get burnt out helping people. If you really think they need your help, my help, and they can't do it without you, it's going to be a huge drain, emotional drain. But that is just not what these principles teach us. And thank you, God, for that, or universe, or mind, or whatever. People are fine, but for their thinking. And what do I know? Unless they come to me for help, I can't assume that people are helpless. That just doesn't make any sense anymore. Not from not knowing what I know and not seeing what I see. So,
see, to me, that's another really important point about people not needing to be fixed. That's huge, right? In terms of what we've been taught, that people do need fixing. There's something wrong with you. You do need fixing.
Well, and if you think someone needs to be fixed, then you're assuming that they're going to be the way they are in that moment permanently. And it changes with just the thought. So why would you worry about fixing somebody with a problem that's presenting itself in this minute, when at any other minute it could change in and of itself and won't even look like a problem anymore?
That makes sense.
And isn't that true? Like, you'll see somebody that's hurting one day, and then you run into them next week and they go, "Oh, how is your mother-in-law?" I'm like, "Oh, is there a problem? What? Something happened to my mother-in-law?" Oh, God. That was a week later, but in the moment it seemed really important. But, and then a few thousands of thoughts later, hundreds of thousands of thoughts later, it's ancient history. It's ancient history. But they're still
so fast.
Yeah.
I think that's enough. So many important points come up on this call, on this session. yeah, we could go on about the note, the don't fix it. I was just going to say it's time to wrap up, and Annie Paul's just sent a comment in. This is a beautiful call. I can feel the love in the UK. She's in the UK. Yeah. I remember Michael Neal talking to me about carers fatigue when my dad had dementia. Never broken.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing to fix, just to be with. That's a beautiful thing, right? That's absolutely, to me, because it kind of, for me, it feels like it stops the helplessness. I think when we want to fix and we see somebody in pain or we see somebody suffering, we go into that, what can I do to help? I don't know what to help. But actually understanding that the being with versus the doing, which we touched on earlier on, that's the most powerful place to come from, right? I mean, that's how I see it.
And people are amazing. They can tolerate all kinds of physical and emotional pain and get just fine. And for some reason, we think, when a child falls down, we have to fix the boo-boo right away to take away their pain. And that's such a silly notion, because they're going to have pain and they're perfectly capable of handling pain. But boy, do we forget when we get insecure.
Good point. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, ladies, I am looking at the time and, to respect our schedule, thinking I need to do my couple of minutes wrap up. But very, very, very grateful for both of you taking the time to be here today. It's been really rich. A great call to set us off, I think, on our 5 days together. So thank you. Thank you. And I'll see you again, Terri, on the very last call. And Patty, thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
A comment popped in on the Q&A box.
Oh, a comment has popped in, has it? Thank you, Charlotte.
And then we have to do our announcements at the end.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, I'll read this out from Ginny, because we love that when people are interacting. It's brilliant. Love is a word, an idea that covers what we all want, being accepted as not broken. That is why we say God is love, or love is God. It's an idea to describe a feeling of being accepted as not broken. We're all the same, not broken. Then we're recognizing the awe that is us essentially as a community within us. Thank you for your shares. So beautiful. Thank you, Ginny. Really appreciate. Thank you to everybody that sent us comments and questions. Really helps us along the way and lets us know that you're there and that something is connecting with you. So again, thank you, Patty and Terri. It's been wonderful.